Hello, everybody. My name is Gustavo Hinojosa. I'm the director for the National Cybersecurity Student Association. I'd like to welcome everybody today to our Raise the Bar Mastery Badge program, a formative credentialing of cybersecurity capability maturity. And one of our speakers today is Dr. David Toby, and I'll introduce him in a minute. I just want to talk a little bit about the National Cybersecurity Student Association. So our objectives here is to support, increase, educate, encourage, and facilitate recruitment and retention. No, that's sorry. All right, very good. There's a couple ways to join the student association. We have a couple different types of membership. So we have a premium membership, which is $20. We got a half a year membership, which is $12.99. We have a participant membership, which is free, and then we also have free membership for faculty if they're a member of the National CyberWatch Center. You'll be able to log into both of the membership portals of CyberWatch and the National Cybersecurity Student Association. So when you're a member of the Student Association, we have a membership portal. There's over 700 resource links in there. We also do a bunch of different work with a bunch of different programs with CyberWatch, and just Raise the Bar is one of them. If you're interested in starting a chapter, it's fairly easy. You have to have a premium membership. You have to have 3 officers, you have to have a faculty member, and you have to fill out an MOU. So once we verify your membership, we get your chapter started and going. And there's a lot of benefits to starting the chapter, which David will talk about CyberWatch programs in a minute. But when you join the association, you have to be 18 years older. This is for the requirements to start a chapter. Yep. You have to have the faculty member. There you go. That's fine. Good. All right. So if you have any questions about starting a student chapter, my information is in the chat box, or any questions about the Student Association in general. But I'm going to pass this over to David so you can talk about this program that is running.
Great. Thank you, Gus. Appreciate it. So Raise the Bar is a program that we've run for a number of years now. It went back to an issue that we were seeing continually in the market. It hasn't changed completely. We've made a little bit of dent in it, but we specifically were working with IBM, who was struggling to find talent like everybody else. And moreover, IBM was very committed to trying to increase the diversity of their cybersecurity workforce, and they were failing miserably. I mean, to make it blunt, they at the time we were talking to them, there were 4 positions they were specifically focused on that they had been having a real difficult time filling, and all of their workers in the area that they were hiring for were basically white males. 95% of their employment pool was white male, and they had spent a lot of money trying to change that, and they certainly were spending a lot of money trying to find talent and not being able to do so. So we suggested to them perhaps the problem was the way they were going about and evaluating the talent that could potentially meet their needs. And they were pretty desperate, so they were willing to try anything. And we said, well, all right, well, would you be willing to throw out the way you've been doing it and instead do it blindly? At first, they're like, what? Said, the problem that lots of research has shown in hiring practices is if you begin with a resume, or you begin with someone's name, or you begin by targeting specific institutions as sources, or you begin by assuming requirements such as degrees of a certain form, then you're immediately biasing the search. And that bias will, first of all, tend towards emphasizing the dominant population, white males, in this field. And it will leave out tremendous talent that you'll just simply overlook or never see because you're fishing in the wrong pond. So they were agreeing to at least give it a shot. And so we introduced this idea of Raise the Bar. BAR is capitalized because it's an acronym for something that comes out of the assessment sciences, which is where I come from, for those who are here for the introduction. Again, I am executive director of the National CyberWatch Center, but for all my life, basically all my academic life, I have been focused on how the brain helps us understand both what someone's capability is and what their capability potential is, and how to maximize that potential and retain that potential even into older age, which is a topic for another day. But what we discovered in identifying where in the brain skills form and how they develop, and really what skills even are, as it turns out, by the way, skills are really just habits, and therefore you can have bad ones. Everyone usually thinks of skills as only good things, but because our brain encodes skills in the same way it encodes habits, you all know you can have a bad habit, and you probably also know how hard it is to change a bad habit. Well, the same is true of skills. And if you develop a skill in the wrong way, you'll create an obstacle to your future development and reduce your future potential. And so over the last couple decades, we've been developing techniques based on these discoveries to, first of all, accurately assess where somebody's capability development is, what are the impediments to further development, and then how to overcome those impediments, enabling us to bring over 90+% of people to mastery in a field as complex as cyber, where national averages, by the way, are less than 5% of those who seek to enter into this field are able to attain mastery. So it's pretty dramatic, the shift that can happen when you focus a little less on what their achievement levels or proxies say, like what degree they have, where they got the degree from, the fact that they even have a degree, as well as a number of other things that people use as proxies. Experience is one of my favorites. People say they want someone with 5, 10, 15 years of experience. They don't really mean that, because I'm sure we all know someone who's been in the same job for 5, 10, maybe even 15 years and never learned anything new. They just do the same thing over and over and over and over again. So yeah, they have experience, but really what the employers in areas like cybersecurity want are people with experiences, people that have seen lots of things, learned lots of new aspects of the field, and are able to adapt and respond to the latest types of threats that'll be different than happened 10, 15 years ago. So to do that, you need to truly have mastered the field. And mastery is associated with the development of a maturation process, starting with being a novice, then becoming a beginner as you start to learn the aspects of the field, move into becoming proficient, where you understand, but perhaps haven't practiced it enough or under a variety of conditions needed to develop competency. And then once you've developed competency, being able to adapt how you do things based on different situations or conditions, which we associate with mastery. And so that progression is really what we're building this program based on. So here's a picture of what that looks like. And this was developed originally for cyber, you can see, quite a while ago. 2012 is when we published the original work. And it clarifies that capabilities are multidimensional, right? It's not just a linear line. It's not even really just a single curve. It's actually working within a 3-dimensional space, combining abilities, knowledge, and skills. And in some aspects of learning science, Dan, you'll probably reflect on this, an acronym was developed years ago called KSA, which is knowledge, skills, and ability. People start throwing that around as though it's the way you describe these things, but that kind of lumps them all together as though they're actually all the same thing. And really, they're very different. Neurologically, they're encoded in different parts of the brain, and they're used in different ways. They're developed in different ways. They're really quite radically different. And so we really should be thinking about it almost in reverse. Ability, skills, and knowledge, which come from asking, A-S-K, asking more than remembering or recalling, which is what knowledge-driven processes are focused on. So knowledge can be measured by your degree of understanding. Is that understanding shallow, or is it very deep? Also, though, we can look at, and again, in these mastery learning programs that we deploy, we're really more interested in not just what you know, but more importantly, what you don't know. As Mark Twain once said, it's not what you know or don't know that gets you into trouble. It's actually what you think you know that just ain't so. And a lot of people fall into that latter category. That's called either a misunderstanding or worse, a misconception. Thinking you know, having that confidence that you really know what to do or what the right answers are, can get you into trouble because that confidence, that belief, is what stands in the way of learning what the real answers are, what the real situation is, and makes it really hard to learn new concepts and techniques if you have a misconception, because you'll protect that misconception until finally you recognize that your belief system might be wrong and you need to rethink your beliefs. So, in effect, expertise in the form of knowledge is much more emotional than cognitive, actually. Now, that then led us to discover what goes on with skills. So, skills really are, as I said, habits. So, you think of habituating or creating habits. What really happens when you create a habit is you become very consistent at your behavior. That behavior could be a thought pattern or it could be an action pattern. But whatever that pattern is, you do it instinctually once you're highly skilled. In fact, so instinctually that generally speaking, your consciousness is completely unaware of it. It becomes so habituated that you aren't even aware of you doing what you're doing. So, like I said, that can be a good thing, of course, if you're doing it in the right way and doing it for the right situations. And that's what we associate with competent people. But you could also be so habituated that you do it even when it's not right. And that will keep you from learning the proper way to perform. So, to assess knowledge, we look at this question of depth, and that depth being both horizontal as well as vertical, right? So width-wise and deep-wise, are you fully understanding something? But understanding is not the same as being able to perform competently. For that, we need to look at, well, how consistent are you under varying conditions in doing that performance? And very specifically, what we're interested in is, can you consistently apply in the right ways, at the right time, for the right situations, when you're distracted or when you're under some form of duress? Because skillful people can do this without paying attention to distraction or distress, because again, attention is conscious and their skill is not conscious. Now, that then leads to ability. And ability is ultimately what we need much of in cyber, because we can't just do the same things over and over again. Things change. Now, there isn't an infinite variety. Everything is sort of change on a theme or change of a common set of parameters. But nevertheless, the number of parameters is quite large. So those with ability have mastered how to apply or change, really, their knowledge and adapt their skills to meet with an unknown or unfamiliar situation. And that requires, as Dan was mentioning earlier, transfer, that you need to be able to take what you've learned and apply it in a situation that is different from where you learned it. And that is based on abilities. Now, assessments of these are all very different. Hopefully you can easily see that from the way I've described them. And unfortunately, much of what people have been using historically are applying the wrong type of assessment to the wrong question. For instance, entrance exams for college admissions are ability tests, but we're really trying to figure out, hey, can they learn? Can they apply what they've learned in a skillful way? So ability tests aren't necessarily appropriate in that environment. Intelligence tests are very similar, right? The Air Force and the Army and Marines have for years applied an assessment called ASVAB to determine placement of personnel coming into the military. It's an intelligence test. It does indeed give us an indication of some transferability, but it doesn't tell us what they can transfer, because it's completely ignoring knowledge and skills. So all of this is an important background to understand. How are you going to demonstrate your capability, maturity to an employer? Because ultimately what they're looking for are people who are well along their pathway to mastery or people that they can slot in while they're still learning their next level up. So what are some of those areas? Well, this is a graphic shows that across all the domains of cyber, there's a variety of areas. For those who might be familiar with something called the National Initiative in Cybersecurity Education, they develop these functional roles up here at the top: operating and maintaining, investigating, collecting and operating, analyzing, etc. What you see aligned with them are a standard set of courseware in cyber that was developed by the National CyberWatch Center many years ago to help guide educational institutions in developing their programming, both at the level of a degree program as well as stackable certificates. So someone could get a part of this. Now, this is very important for that example I was telling you about IBM, because they were assuming they just wanted people with a degree and they were specifically focusing on perhaps a particular role and not considering people's capabilities outside of that. So what we did with them is we said, well, let's take your job and actually break it down into what is it they really need to do on a day-to-day basis. And instead of mapping at a top level or ability, which is what they had focused on, let's instead focus on how skillfully can they perform and what knowledge do they have that can be applied in your particular domain. And what we discovered was that mapping, which is what BAR stands for. It's called a behaviorally anchored rating. So it looks at the behaviors that someone is able to do, as well as their recognition of when it should be done, as a way of predicting, very accurately as it turns out, whether they can do well on that job. And when they applied these behaviorally anchored ratings in lieu of their traditional assessments and evaluations, even in lieu of an interview, they were able to identify perfect, really, candidates for their jobs. Now, when I say perfect, I don't mean someone that had 100% of what they needed, but perfect in that they were so well aligned that their profile of capability sufficiently matched what was needed. And by knowing what additional capabilities needed to be developed, IBM could invest in that person's development to get them to be exactly what they needed them to be, knowing that they could still serve an important role immediately in the areas of their current capability while they develop their advanced capability. But here was the best part. Remember, 95% white male was what they were finding when they were applying the traditional approach. Out of the 4 people they hired, one of them was a white male. So they went from 95% down to 25%. And they, in effect, tripled, because 3 others, compared to the 1, they tripled their candidate pool by finding people who had a profile that was radically different from their traditional one. One of them was completely self-taught with no degree. One of them had gone through military training, but not formal education, and would have been completely missed by their search processes. One of them had gone to a community college and graduated from the community college, and they were convinced that they needed to hire somebody out of a university. It turned out none of that was needed for the job that they had planned for them to do. As a result of this and other programs that IBM was running, they changed the way they do hiring, and they started referring to what they called new collar jobs instead of blue collar jobs and white collar jobs. White collar meaning those who came from university educations, blue collar meaning those who had less formal or no formal education. They said, no, we just got to get the right people in the position. So let's have a new collar job where everybody's eligible, and we'll hire them based on their skills and based on their potential capability that we can fulfill using these types of capability assessments. So what we've been doing is helping organizations do these things, and they come to us looking for talent. They come to our events, which I'll talk about at the end, that you can participate in, or for faculty, your students can participate in, which allows them to be matched with employers that are well aligned with their current capability and their potential capability. And so when they come to what we call the talent fair is like a reverse job fair, they get the opportunity to meet with those who are excellent candidates for their jobs, and consequently the employers send their best people, which is a little different than if any of you have been to a job fair. You know, employers never really know who's going to come to a job fair, and they don't want to waste time of very expensive and valuable people who are from their hiring group. So they'll send a marketing person to hand out brochures and to meet people, tell you a little bit about their company. Job candidates come to those thinking, I want a job. I'm going to talk to somebody who's going to give me a job. Well, no, you're going to talk to somebody who's going to give you information about their company. You probably could find that information online. So, wow, either party is getting what they want. They get some value. They get aware of each other. They exchange information and they can follow up. But they weren't really getting what they needed. So we introduced this talent fair, a reverse job fair, where it isn't the employer that has the booth, it's the job seeker. And we work with the job seeker using these capability maturity assessments to create a profile of where are they along the string. And I apologize for the typo there, competent. But where are they in progression of their capability so that we can match them with employers who need someone at that level. And then the employer can either walk around the room and see these capability profiles. I'll show you an example of in a minute, presented on posters around the room that the job seeker is standing in front of their poster with their capabilities on a part of the what's behind them and an area for them to add special, accolades and other things that are evidence of their capabilities. And they can find those are good matches. Or they can actually, in advance, submit their job description to us and we'll work with them to figure out, well, how do we know if somebody's a good match, like we did for IBM? And then they can interview those right on site that meet their requirements. So that approach, the talent fair, gets both parties what they want. Employers find a good match for their needs and job seekers get a job. So let's talk about how you can learn what your capabilities are, or again, for faculty, how you could have your students learn what their capabilities are. And the other thing is, by knowing their capabilities, you also know what should be on their learning plan. What should they be learning next? This is based on what you see here, the profile of the 14 areas of responsibility across really all of cyber, everything from risk to management to technical capabilities that are needed to perform varying cyber roles. These 14 areas were developed many years ago by the National Board of Information Security Examiners. And it worked with a number of federal agencies, including NSA and DHS, to develop profiles that would enable them to understand the type of people they needed to hire and who might be good candidates for those positions. So what you'll see and what you'll have an opportunity to actually do today, we'll actually give you an opportunity to fill out a capability, one of the capability maturity assessments, is that it produces or will produce for you a profile that tells you for each of these areas, where are you? And this is what it looks like. So a capability maturity profile, there's your 14 areas of responsibility. The bars are indicating the relative capability that you have as a beginner, proficient, competent, or an expert or master. So anything you see that's a bar above the yellow means, yeah, I know what to do. But you got to be above the blue line here vertically in order to have practiced it enough in the proper ways to have developed the competence at applying what you knew. And then finally, by getting exposure to a variety of experiences, you can develop mastery. And there may be areas in which you're a master. So this is a real result, by the way, from an IT person at a large bank. And it immediately showed that, well, yeah, they had some really good capabilities, but there were still always areas that they weren't quite so good at. Like, for instance, exploiting penetration targets, they were still not even proficient on how to do that. Well, not surprisingly, if you're not proficient at understanding how systems can be exploited, you're probably going to have a more difficult time addressing post-exploitation or even identifying an attack that has occurred. And therefore, not surprisingly, their response to intrusions, was proficient but not competent. And other areas were in that same boat, and they were not able to identify targets or even understand yet. They were just barely getting to proficiency in that. Now, we also use these assessments to give you a relative ranking against peers. So we will give you a relative ranking in terms of your different responsibility area maturities for a particular job. How ready are you for that job? Is your capability low, medium, or high in your readiness to perform that job? So out of these 14, there were 7 areas in which this individual's capabilities were ready to perform that job. 5 were still in development, and 1 was very much a novice. You can probably guess where that was. But then we also allow those to be broken down further. And so these are examples of some of these further breakdowns. Now, these can be done specific to an industry. They can be done specifically to a particular employer. And certainly they're done broadly related to general frameworks. So this framework is the NIST framework. I hope many of you are familiar with that. And it looks at the different areas of technology and what that person's score is and what is their level in that area. Similarly, we can look at other types of targeting. So historically, a lot of organizations, as I said, have used assessments that are not really focused on creating this kind of a profile view. They're more focused on achievement. And achievement is looking at things retrospectively. It's what have you done, have you learned, have performed, those kinds of things, right? And so it is looking at, well, what are you ready for right now? And they're valuable for that. But they're not really giving you a glimpse as to what that person might be able to do in the future. What is their potential? And how can I use instruction to help them reach that potential? So, because I'm giving them instruction that they're ready to learn, as opposed to instruction that they may not be ready to learn and therefore not benefit from. Now, that readiness to learn was studied many, many years ago by an educational researcher, Lev Vygotsky, and he identified what he called the zone of proximal development, meaning that what is that optimal space where you've developed a capability that's prerequisite to learning it, but you're still challenged by it sufficiently to need development. So you're not over challenged and you're not under challenged, and therefore you'll be in your proper zone to learn. That's looking for, well, what could you be ready for tomorrow? Because if I know you're in your zone to learn something new, then I can very quickly make you ready to do those things in the future. That requires assessments that are diagnostic, that are looking at how you go about your learning. How do you design instructional systems, as well as how does a learner design their approach to learning? And then, of course, specifically, what is it that they need to develop? So that's what the Raise the Bar assessments are about. We're going to give you an opportunity right now to try one. It should take no more than about 15 minutes or so for you to complete, maybe 20, depending how deliberate you are at each answer. It is examining your readiness to be an entry-level security engineer. Now, the way these work is it's going to ask you about certain tasks. And it's going to ask you how confident you are in performing them and also how frequently they should be performed. It uses that to calibrate your experiences. And it's very accurate. Even though we're not putting you in a lab, it's actually a more accurate assessment of your capability than your performance in a lab, because every lab is one experience designed with one set of parameters, one set of conditions. Whereas this is able to predict across many conditions, many situations, many different types of environments. So the link has been put in the chat. Thank you for that, Gus. And it will ask you first if you have an assigned respondent ID. The chances are you're going to say no, and that's okay. It will give you one. Please make note of that respondent ID. We do not want to know who you are. We want to know what your number is. But that will give you that ability to retrieve or have retrieved your response profile when it takes us a little time to analyze the result, because we want to do that comparison against peers. But you'll be able to request your response, and then the backend system will be able to look at your respondent ID, figure out who you are, and it will give you the appropriate profile with us not having known who you are. And that's done for a number of reasons, not least of which is we want to keep your personal information private. So please do take some time and go into that assessment. And then I'm going to be quiet unless anybody has questions. We'll let you work away and we'll reconvene in about 15 minutes or so.
What should we choose for a response group ID?
Okay, if you see that, you should just say no. Oh, you mean ID in terms of the type? Sorry.
Yeah, so please choose your response group ID from the list.
Yeah, right. There should be one there for CyberWatch.
Are they doing cyber? There's one for the student association also, David. So I don't know.
Yeah, right. There you go. You can choose that. That's fine. It's just to put you in a general category. So we do these obviously for specific institutions. You'll probably see some listed there that we've performed these for. So basically pick the one that's most relevant. So student association would certainly be good.
Can I give some feedback?
Yeah, go ahead. David's listening.
The
Yeah, sorry,
red
please,
is,
please, I was muted. Go ahead.
the red is really, really hard for me to read.
The red?
Yeah, so I didn't see this side that said how many times, once a year, twice a year, blah, blah, blah. And I clicked next and it came back and it said, these are mandatory, you must complete all parts. And then reading the question back as in red is really difficult to read.
Oh, interesting. Okay, good to know. Thank you. So it looks like we have about 4 people that are still working away. Let's just give a minute or so more to have them have, or a couple minutes, just to have them have the opportunity to complete if they wish. The system also should retain state. You can, I believe, also save state if you wish to come back to it later. The main point was to give you a sense of how one of these assessment works. Now, this one, as I mentioned, is very specifically designed for a particular job role at a particular organization. What we would normally do is customize these for the purpose. So if a particular employer wants to use this for them, they would have it customized to their specific job task assignments. So, and if it was more general, it would be obviously based on sort of typical job roles. Gus, you and I both replied to Dan almost the same time. It's kind of funny. All right, so let's just kind of wrap up. Let me pop myself back on video. See if I can find my thing. There we go. Come back to you. All right, well, there we go. Well, I hope that's been instructive, at least to give you a sense of the type of questioning. What's probably quite unique about this, I suspect you haven't seen too many of these type of assessments in your past. Though anyone who has ever been sort of exposed to what's called a concept inventory, which is the closest type of assessment, it is used in physics and a number of other fields. That is what's called a confidence inventory as well, meaning that you're given a statement, a question, whatever, you determine what the answer is, and you indicate how confident you are in that answer. We use those extensively as well in other assessments that, as I said, this is just one of many that we apply. And those are really good for determining someone's level of proficiency because, and discovering where they have misconceptions and misunderstandings. Because your confidence in your knowledge is a really great indicator of if you're making good decisions. Yeah, well, if you're highly confident, good decisions, you probably do understand it. If you're not so confident in your good decisions, you're probably still learning it. And the difficulty there is you may be understanding it at some level, but remember that shallow to deep. If you understand something in a shallow way, meaning that you kind of get it, but you're not real sure about it, then you're just as likely to change your understanding as you are to keep your understanding. And so being in a learning state is good, but still a little dangerous, because if that learning state doesn't progress all the way to mastery and full understanding, you may lose it. In fact, your brains are designed to lose it. That's why cramming works. You don't have to fully understand something to cram for a test. Everyone sort of knows that, right? However, it only works if that test is very soon after you crammed. If it's 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, won't help you because your brain will have wiped out all those things that you didn't really confidently understand, and you won't be prepared for it. However, if you take it the next morning, especially if you don't sleep after cramming, you'll remember a lot more. And then, of course, it'll be gone 3 or 4 days later if you didn't really understand it. Now, on the other hand, if you confidently misunderstand, that's a problem, right? Because that's a misconception, actually. Misunderstanding is not so confident. You have a sense, hey, I don't quite get this. You're getting it wrong, and you sort of know you're getting it wrong, or at least you're enough uncertain that you'd be open to figuring out what is the right understanding. But if you confidently make bad decisions, you've got a misconception, and that is going to be much harder to change. So that's where our other programs come in. So one of the other programs, I mentioned the Talent Fair. What gets you ready for the Talent Fair is the Skills to Succeed coaching program. We had a webinar on that just last week, I think it was. Gus, if I remember right. I'm getting old. But we had a webinar on that. We'll do those again periodically. So be on the lookout for the Skills to Succeed, professional Skills to Succeed coaching program. It uses your assessment of capability, assigns you to a coach who will help you navigate that assessment and figure out how to prepare yourself to be ready to get employed and work in a particular area. And we go into detail about that program in the Cyber Ready Skills to Succeed professional coaching program. Now, what do you do next? So one thing is think about signing up for that. It will allow you to take these assessments, get a coach assigned to you to help you interpret and act upon the information that's presented to you, and enable you to be eligible to participate in a talent fair. Enroll in the program overall, and that way you'll be presented with other assessments down the road to continue to develop your understanding of your capability and to give you material that can be used to help employers determine whether you're a good match for their roles. Come to one of our cybersecurity capabilities and careers symposia, paper or proposal development workshops. These are a great place to start to develop your skill sets. We have different programs at them that are designed for different people at different stages. That'll make more sense as you come to one of those. We hold them all over the country, so be on the lookout for that on our website. And you can get more information about the next one that's coming up February 24th at that URL. And then finally, attend these regional events. Next one is March at our campus in Largo, Maryland. There'll be one in the Northeast in April. In May, it'll be in the Southeast. And then later in the year, we'll be bringing it all the way out to some of the Western regions. We're always looking for hosts. So if any of your institutions would be interested in being a host for 3CS, we'd certainly love to know about that. The QR codes will get you to the registration pages and more information about each of those. Okay, that's just more information about what happens at a 3CS. There are 5 different symposia, hence plural. Each symposium covers a different target audience. There's one for educators, the Community College Cyber Summit. That's the granddaddy of them all. It's been run for over a decade. And National Science Foundation refers to it as the signal event in cyber education, because it's really where everybody goes to hear what is the latest and greatest tools and techniques for teaching cyber. Then we've added these other 4 recently over the last few years because NSF really wanted us to expand, as did NSA. And so now, besides the teaching summit, there's also programs for researchers, the Science and Practice Symposium, as well as practitioners who are seeking to employ evidence-based practices. The Capability Maturity Symposium is for raising the current skill levels. So again, if these assessments indicate you have specific areas that need improvement, the Capability Maturity Symposium is great to get the hands-on learning you need in order to raise your capabilities. The Cyber Education and Career Symposium is just what it says. It's about tools and techniques for education, so vendor exhibits, as well as that's where the talent fair and the job fair happen. So employer booths are the job fair, and the job candidate booths are the talent fair. And then finally, there's the fun of 3CS, participating in games and simulations and competitions. And so again, be on the lookout for announcements in your area, and let us know if you'd like to see one nearby, and we'll work with institutions to help bring that about. So that's really pretty much it for tonight. If anybody has any further questions or comments, feel free to unmute. I'll stick around for a little bit. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and we'll let you know about future events. Gus, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I got a quick question about how are there ways for faculty and students to volunteer for these 3CS events? And then one.
Great question. Absolutely. We're always looking for folks to help out both in our planning and the execution of the event. For students, it's phenomenal, by the way. It's a great, one of the best pieces of advice I could give a student is volunteer for everything, because those volunteer experiences are valuable experiences. Working at a conference, employers, do their own types of meetings, and having somebody with meeting experiences is another reason for them to hire you. We hear often from employers, they want people with soft skills. What does that really mean? It means that you're good at communicating, and you're good at organizing, and you're good at things that aren't just the technical things. Well, those aren't really easy to learn. So they're really not soft at all. They're actually the hard skills. They're the hard ones. The technical skills, actually, those are fairly easy. You can take a class on how to do a particular technical thing, but you can't just take a class on how to communicate well. You've got to get lots of practice in communicating well. Well, one of the best ways to do that is present at a conference or be involved in how we're organizing those things and gain those soft skills. So I strongly urge students to get involved as volunteers. But of course, we love to have faculty work with us as well. We have program committees. This takes a village to put together. And so CyberWatch doesn't really run these. The community runs these. And we're always looking for folks to help out. There are links that we could put in the chat. I don't know if you do that, Gus. You're always very good about that. That will give you the call for participation. I'll pop it in here in a second if Gus hasn't beat me to it. So give me a second. There is the link to sign up if you're interested in helping out with one of the upcoming 3CS events. It'll provide you a little bit more information about that, as well as give you an opportunity, of course, to register your interest.
Another question too. I know sometimes we have stipends available for faculty and student chapters to attend these conferences and or participate in them. Will there be any opportunities coming up for travel stipends for students and or faculty?
Yes, very much so. So thanks again, Gus. Great question. So we bring in, funds from federal agencies, from sponsors at these events, and those funds get turned around to support more people participating. And so we continually have sort of a new supply of scholarship funds, you might say, or fellowship funds that we can use to support those participating in these programs. So obviously that changes from time to time and program to program. So that information will always be on the registration page for that event. Again, give me a second here. I'll put one. Oh, I guess we had it already in there, but let me put one up for the upcoming PDW, and that will give you. They're similar in their structure. So this link that I'm about to post, copy it. Is the one for the session proposal development workshop to be held at our campus coming up in about a month. No, what am I talking about? This one's next week. and we have one of these every month somewhere. So there's one coming up next week at our campus. There's one coming up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in a month. That was the one I was thinking of. And but the pages for them look very similar. So if you go to that event, the link that is now in the chat, you could get further information about the stipends that are available. And we have stipends for those who come and are just presenting their ideas. And all you need is a rough idea. You could have something very developed too. That's great. But if all you have is just an idea, please come. That's why we're there. You'll have mentors and peers there to help you develop that idea into a session. If you're interested in being a mentor, there's a little higher stipend for that because you're contributing back. And that information is also available on those sites.
Another quick question too. Could you kind of go the process and the different? I know there's two different types of symposiums you can do. So you got the paper available workshops, and then once you attend that, you can present at the regional 3CS. Can you explain the differences?
Yeah, great question. So you can think of it kind of as a spiraling up of your capability, and everything we've talked about tonight has been about that, right? Assessing your capability and then developing it. So that starts with the session proposal development workshops. Now, those are of varying types. So you can propose, if you're a student, for instance, you could propose what is it you're going to put in your talent fair booth and get some coaching on what should be on that in that poster behind you. It could be a dialogue session. That's one of the easiest ones to do. And I strongly encourage students, especially as well as faculty, to do these because it's a way of gathering information that enables you to become an expert by basically doing a focus group of people who are familiar with the issues that you're raising and can provide you feedback and insights as to how to understand or address that issue. And by gathering those things, you quickly become an expert in that area. As many years I was involved in the consulting profession, and a good mentor of mine, who was actually one of the founders of Accenture, told me once that everybody's born to be a consultant because all you need is two of these and two of these and one of these. And as long as you remember that you're supposed to observe or listen twice to 4 times as much as you talk, you'll be successful as a consultant because the answers are out there. You just need to ask the right questions, listen to the answers, assimilate it, and then start to feed it back. And by feeding it back, you are now the expert. So great things to do for students. Also, obviously, for faculty researching areas that are not well understood, these dialogue sessions are extraordinarily valuable. Now, we also allow you to have those turned into a transcript and then have them published in our cybersecurity skills journal. So it's a great way also to get an article published. And as a student, I can't tell you how valuable that can be. I'm sure our faculty members here would tell you, if they see an applicant who's got 2 or 3 publications, their value is going to go way up to their program, especially if it's a research-oriented institution. So those kinds of experiences are really valuable. Then there's also demonstration sessions where you're going to be showing something that people can then do and apply right there in the room with you. And then there are also evidence-based practice sessions where you're reporting on some analysis you've done. Now, as I said, you give the idea at the proposal development workshop and they help you formulate that idea, but then you run that session first at a regional event. And that regional event will give you even more feedback. And then you might run it at another regional event, depending on the maturity of the session, how much feedback you get, how well you think it's ready, and others think it's ready for the prime time, if you will. And then once you've done it enough to get it kind of really figured out, then do it at the national event or the international event. So coming up in 2025, we'll be holding our first international conferences, one in Europe and one in Central America. So lots of opportunities for you to continue to practice and improve each step of the way in developing your capabilities.
One more question. As far as stipends goes, if I live in Florida right now and I go to the next one in Florida and I'm a student and I apply for the stipend and I get it, can I apply for a stipend in a different region and receive monies also if money's available? Can I do I kind of double dip in all these and go to different conferences?
You absolutely double, triple, quadruple dip, right? Now there is a hierarchy of a qualification for that. Obviously, people that are new are going to be a little bit, more prioritized because we want to get more people involved. But we usually have enough funding that we can support just about everybody who applies. So it really, but nevertheless, there's a hierarchy. We also give priority to people who come from schools with CyberWatch chapters, student association chapters, things like that. So there's a point system that we're kind of developing that will help us with determining who gets those stipends as they're formed. But right now, we really haven't ever run out of funds. So right now, we've been fortunate enough to be able to say yes to everybody that applies. At some point, that may change. But right now, the important lesson, I guess, is apply early. And that way you're sure that whatever funds are there, you're in the mix for.
How do I start a student club? I have a student club, but I want to get them registered with you all, is what I'm really saying.
So to start a student chapter, you could contact me. We could have a meeting about it. But pretty much all you just need to be a faculty member of the national. Well, you have to be an academic member of the National CyberWatch Center. Once I verify you're an academic member, you have to have 3 chapter officers, which is the president, secretary, treasury, or vice president. You have to have at least 3 officers. And those 3 officers have to be paid members, which is $19.99 for the year. And what that $19.99 gets you, you get access to the member portal. The students do and the faculty do, and then you get to attend all these different programs that CyberWatch has. For instance, with 3CS, right? Student chapters have first dibs on the travel stipends for 3CS. So it's fairly easy, and I know a lot of times colleges, universities already have chapters, already have clubs, and they don't want to have multiple competing clubs. So you can kind of integrate our chapter into your existing club, so we don't have to make things difficult for institution.
So just have them go register at the website and pay the $20, Gus, and then send you an email with because we're already an academic member, so just send you an email and then we can get verified and get them going.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I will take care of that tomorrow when I see them.
Awesome. And what state are you in, Stu? What school?
Washington State, Eastern Washington University.
When's the next event do we have, David, around that area? Everything flat? You're muted.
Actually, that's one of those ones that we're looking to find a hosting site. So
Gotcha.
we haven't gotten anybody yet from the Northwest identified as a site, but we hope to
I
do
would
that.
love to, in a year, maybe be a hosting site for you all.
That'd be great.
Another good question for David. Students could travel from anywhere in the United States to any of these events. What would be like a maximum travel stipend for a student to travel from Washington to say our Florida national event?
Yeah, so it is dependent on distance from how far your home is from the actual site. And so they're done in ranges. Gosh, you're not asking me.
That's okay. Just
I think
ballpark.
it's around, don't quote me, but I think it's around $1,800. I will tell you that
Okay.
at the recent session proposal development workshop, we had a faculty member, they get the same, stipend support as students do, who came from Hawaii. Now, I'm fairly certain the stipend wasn't enough to cover the whole trip. And it's not necessarily always intended to do that. It's intended to defray as much of the cost as possible so that you have minimal to no, out of pocket. But anyway, it is based on distance from the venue. And what I will tell you also is our goal is to eventually have one of these conferences. We'll have session proposal development workshops all over, but to actually have a public event, conference in each of the CISA regions. So there are 10 CISA regions in the United States. It will take us a number of years to get to that many. We did 3 last year. We're going to do probably 5 this year, maybe 6. And then we'll creep up towards 10. So that means we're combining regions right now. So for instance, the Southwest 3CS is going to serve Region 9, which is California and Nevada, Arizona, and I think Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. And then the South Central, which basically is east from what I just described all the way over to, I think, Louisiana, like the Mississippi or something. Anyway, if you look at a CISA map, you can see what all these are. We also have a listing of them. When you register, it'll probably ask you for your CISA region. It gives you the listing. But we're going to combine some regions initially, and then eventually they'll have their own. It all depends, of course, on hosting sites. So, but that's our
and also for the furthest bracket is you get $1,800. That's more than enough for your flight and for a couple days and for some food. So if students, if you have students that are interested in going to our national conference, they should apply for stipends as soon as possible. And if they have the chapter, they're higher on the bracket. And if a faculty presents with their student chapter, you even go higher on the bracket to receiving those funds. The faculty and the students receive the funds. So there's a lot of different things that we could do. And then when you start your chapter, we could get together, have a meeting, you, David, and I, and talk about all the different stuff we can do with the chapter.
Good.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. I hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking. And remember that there's lots of opportunities for you to engage with us at CyberWatch and at the National Cybersecurity Student Association. We look forward to seeing you again in an upcoming webinar or at one of our events.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a wonderful day. Take care.